Hey everybody, Jane here, and today I am doing my best and worst books of 2019. So the criteria I'm looking at for best books is books that I really enjoyed, books that really stood out to me. A lot of these, but not all of them, are going to be 5-star reads. Basically, I went over my Goodreads list of the books I'd read this year and picked out ones that, especially by the end of the year, are still in my head, still had an impact, still very much books that I felt were the best books of the year. And then, on the other hand, I also have the worst books of the year. And these are books, these were actually harder to figure out. I only have 3 on my list of the worst books. And a big part of that is simply because I've really gotten good at DNFing books. It is really rare at this point for me to take a book all the way through and not enjoy it. So these books typically were in the 2-star range. They were ones that I was really disappointed by and I felt like had big issues. And they were ones that I felt were just very poorly done. Now, I'm going to do a separate video for my surprises and disappointments, and a lot of the books that maybe I felt really upset about, but I felt like I was upset because of expectations versus quality of the book, those will probably be on that list instead of this one. So here are my top books of the year and then my bottom books of the year. So the first best book of the year was A Curse So Dark and Lonely. Now I know this book is kind of controversial. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I loved it. I can't wait for the sequel. I was really engaged with it. I was really excited about the fantasy story. Fantasy's kind of hit or miss for me, but this I really enjoyed. I also truly just enjoyed the story, the characters, the disability rep. It was great. I can't wait for the next book. I loved this book. It was one of my best books of the year. The second book on this list was a book I read for middle grade March, and that book was Sweep. That book left me so full of emotion. It is about a little girl who is a chimney sweep, and she becomes friends with a golem who she cares for, and it very much goes into some of the horrors that were being inflicted on the working class in the industrial age England. And it just, even thinking back on it, it gives me all the feels. It was an amazing book. And if you enjoy middle grade, this one, oh, it was so good. I highly recommend for next middle grade March. The next book that was a standout to me was The Wonder of Lost Causes. This book is basically a boy and his dog book, which is right up my alley and everything I love. And I had such a good time with this book. It started me on a path of reading other books by this author, and I am really enjoying his books in general, but The Wonder of Lost Causes just, it hit me in the feels so very much. The next book on my list was a huge surprise to me as to how much I loved it, and that was Typin, Bout, My Generation. And this book was a nonfiction book about urging older people to write their story because they are the only ones who can. They are living in a generation that is different than every other generation that will ever live or ever has lived, and only they have the perspective that they do. And what I ended up taking from that was kind of that every writer should write their story, not just necessarily retirees who the book was really aimed at. So I really enjoyed that book. I gave it 5 stars. It gave me all the feels, and I was so excited that I read it. The next book on my list, and this one I wasn't sure about putting in because it was not a 5-star, but I did think it was one of the best books that I read, and it deserved to be on this list, and that was The Testaments. I love The Handmaid's Tale, but I'd read it before, so I couldn't put that on this list. And The Testaments was so well done. I didn't necessarily have the same emotional connection to it that I did to The Handmaid's Tale, but I still really, really was engaged, and I loved it, and I liked the exploration of Gilead. So I thought it was a well-written book, and I really, really had a good time reading it. The last two are by the same author and in the same series. So I'm putting them kind of together, and that is When a Scot Ties the Knot and Romancing the Duke. I had never read Tess Adair until this year, and now I want to read everything Tess Adair has ever written. And I've read 4 of her books now, and When a Scot Ties the Knot is my absolute favorite. Like right behind it is Romancing the Duke. So I am absolutely loving Tess Adair. I absolutely found a new writer that I'm in love with, and that was amazing. And those books just gave me so many feelings. I used to be a really avid historical romance reader, and I still enjoy them, but I kind of stopped reading them, and I feel almost like she reminded me why I love that genre. So yeah, I was so excited to read her, and I just can't wait to read everything Tess Adair has ever written. All right, so those were my top reads that I loved. And now my bottom, my 3 worst reads of the year. All right, number 1 was Cold Moon. This book is a mystery, and the plot was a mess. There were twists and twists and twists and twists, and for me, there were just too many twists. I did not love the level of twists in this book, and I really was frustrated because I thought I was enjoying the book up until we got close to the end. It was a solid 3. And for me, a lot of mysteries are going to be a solid 3. A lot of genre fiction. If a romance or a mystery is a 3, it did what I wanted it to do. It met my expectations. It was fine. It didn't necessarily do anything stand out, but it didn't do anything poorly. It wasn't a bad reading experience. And then I got to the end, and all the craziness started happening of this book. And let me tell you, I was so mad by the time I was over it. I was so mad that I could not believe it, that this book had dragged me along this whole way, and then it did all the crazy stuff at the end, and I was just angry with the book. So that was my first worst book of the year. My second, and this was a very recent read, so I am still salty about it, is The Big Four. And that is the 5th book in the Hercule Poirot series. I am struggling with Hercule Poirot. I love the characters. The mysteries are kind of meh. But I have been enjoying them okay. Most of them have been a 3, but book 4, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, was my favorite Poirot so far. And I just, after I was done with it, I wanted to pick up the next Poirot. I was like, that was amazing. I want more of that. I want more of the feels. And right after that, I picked up The Big Four. And The Big Four was a complete and utter mess. It did not feel like a Hercule Poirot book. It felt like Hercule Poirot does Rocky and Bullwinkle, or Hercule Poirot tries to be James Bond, or, back in the day when, I assume they still do this, I don't watch enough TV to know, but in the 90s, everything had to have a musical episode somewhere along the way, or a black and white episode, or something crazy to make it stand out. And you just you watch it and you're like, if this is your first time viewing this series, this is not really what the series is. And a couple people were like, oh, that's great, it's so artistic and wonderful. And the rest of us were like, man, that was my least favorite episode, please don't do that again. That's me. And that was how I felt about this book, The Big Four. So I was totally disappointed in it, especially coming off of the high of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And I was so angry. And it really, it was not a fun read, and I'm salty, seriously salty. The last book I am less angry at, but it still was one of my worst books of the year. And that was The Silence of Ghosts. This was a book I read in October for the Disability Readathon, And it's a horror book. Horror is not my typical genre. And I think I was just really disappointed because it had a cool idea, it had a cool premise, and I kept reading. And I wasn't really loving the writing style, but I kept hoping we'd get a payoff since it is a horror. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and we get to the end, and I was just like, that's it? We don't get any explanation, and it was not well explained. There was no payoff. So I really just was so angry at this book that it didn't give me what I wanted, but considering it's not in my genre, I was a lot less angry with it than, for instance, the mysteries, which is what I read a lot of and absolutely love. And I had read this for the Disability Readathon. I probably could have DNF'd it. It wasn't a book that necessarily strung me along like I felt the other two on this list did. This book, it didn't give me the payoff at the end that I really wanted. So those were my best, and there were quite a few of them, and worst. And I'm glad there weren't very many of those reads of the year. What were your tops and bottoms of the year? Please let me know in the comments below. Also, if you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. My social media is below if you would like to contact me outside of YouTube. Also, I'm a writer, and my list of books are down below either through Amazon or Smashwords. I do have a couple books that are on Kindle Unlimited if you are in that program and would like to read them for free. I have some books on Audible, and if you are in the romance package, I have several on there that you can read for free as well. So please check me out if you enjoy romance, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.